So you've got skills, you've got expertise, you've got passion, but turning that into real income has been a struggle. Maybe you feel you need to hustle harder, lower your prices, or just get a big following online. The thing is, monetizing your expertise does not require a huge audience. So today I'm going to break down some of the common mistakes I see people make when trying to monetize, whether it's online, offline, somewhere in between. I'm going to break all these down, lay out the right strategy for you, and share a couple of simple shifts you can make in order to get paid for what you know. This topic is something very near and dear to me. It's something that I walk with people through very, very often because a big portion of what I do is to help people sort of navigate this transition from their regular job and or starting a side hustle into scaling that up into a full-time business. So let's talk about mistake number one, and that is selling everything low ticket first, especially your time. You have to sell something that's high ticket. Now, a lot of people who are getting started will struggle with this. They'll say, I'm going to create a $20 product. I'm going to create a $20 service. I'm going to sell an hour of my time for coaching for $100. And I get that. I've been there because $100 an hour might sound like a lot, depending on what your salary was at a previous job or position or whatnot. But those things don't really scale because you're automatically putting a limit on what you can earn. You don't have any leverage. So if you're going to do that at all, if you're going to sell something low ticket, you want to sell a product low ticket and at least sell your time at a higher ticket amount. The way to establish this price in your mind is to ask yourself, how far would you drive through the worst traffic you could possibly think of for an hour to get paid? If somebody called you, I live near New York City, and they called you and said, hey, I've got a check for you in the middle of Manhattan. You've got to drive across the Hudson River or whatever it is and through the Lincoln Tunnel or whatever it is for 30 minutes of god awful bumper to bumper traffic, pick up the check, and then drive 30 minutes back home through the same kind of traffic. What amount of money would that need to be? Now, obviously, this will change over the course of your business, the course of your life. It'll depend on the circumstances that you're in. But if you really position it that way, and I know some of you are thinking, well, Mike, does that include tolls? Just forget about that. Just pretend it's a dollar amount. Take out the gas and the toll and the expenses and all that. What would that amount be? I call it my traffic from hell hourly price. And you need to have that anchored in your mind because when you're getting started, you don't have a large audience, you don't feel like you have a lot of prospects. You still have to take control. If anything, this is the time for you to make this decision. You don't wait for the market to dictate your value. You dictate your value to the market, at least right now in your mind, the best that you can. Everything else, testing things, comes with time, but you have to have something in your mind first so that you can have an anchor point to build around. Okay. So if you have only a $10 or $20 product and then you don't have an audience, you're hosed. You don't have a monetization stream that's viable because it takes time to build an audience. It takes time to build trust, especially if you're not with people face to face. A lot of folks think that if you're really talented and you go viral online, that automatically you're going to make a lot of money. That's not true. It's not necessarily true. Think about all the viral videos you've watched over the last year. Have you purchased from any of these people, especially if they're experts in some field that you're interested in? Chances are you've probably watched a couple of their videos, maybe listened to a few podcast episodes, maybe even picked up a book if they have one. You're spending a lot of time with them. Some estimates say that you've got to spend, a prospect needs to spend about 10 hours with an expert before they engage in purchasing something that's higher ticket. 10 hours. And when they break down the research, it's like over 5 different channels. So maybe it's like an Instagram post or a couple of videos on Instagram. Maybe it's a YouTube video and you see them on a bunch of different shows, maybe a podcast. You read an article somewhere on LinkedIn and maybe you pick up their book and then you really engage. Like really think about that. So the rule of thumb is the lower the price, the more of an audience you need. Case in point, my book, You Are the Brand. I make very little money on every single copy of this book sold. And if I wanted to make, let's say, $100,000 off book sales, man, I've got to sell a lot of books. I need a lot of people to buy this. But I have sold coaching programs, certifications, workshops, conferences based off the intellectual property in this book for millions of dollars. Less people, higher ticket, way easier to make money, right? So I just want to put that in perspective. That is a huge mistake that I see people make. It's pricing their time too low, even in the beginning, even when they're getting started. What happens if you keep doing that, you will create a pathway, like a habit in your mind, that this is the most that you can make. So if you really believe you have expertise in what you do, you really know how to solve certain problems, at least price your time high in the beginning. All right, second mistake I see people make is that they do not have a signature offer. Maybe someone meets you, you meet them at a networking party, maybe you got to share somewhere on a podcast or online or at an event for a couple minutes, and people say, "Hey, how do I work with you?" And you just go blank. You have no idea. You have to assume that people want to work with you. If you approach every opportunity with the assumption that people are going to want to hire you, you'd show up very differently, and you would definitely have a couple of things ready in tow, and at least have some sort of hourly package, coaching package, consulting package ready at the go. You don't need all these fancy bells and whistles. You don't need all this crazy website stuff. Okay. You just need a simple intake form. You can use a Google form or whatnot, but just tell them with confidence, with clarity, this is how we can engage one another. In many respects, I've met people who have run multiple $1 million businesses as consultants, coaches, speakers. They don't have a lot of the marketing things that you would expect. They fly very under the radar, which is really cool, right? To a certain extent, that's really, really cool. Maybe it adds to their mystique and their aura, but they absolutely have clarity on what their signature offer is. You can purchase 3 hours of my time in this package, and this is how we work together. You can buy a 10-hour block of my time, and this is how we work together. You have to have something. Now, to really break this down, right? I know me saying that you should have a signature offer, just create one. Sounds like me telling you to go boil the ocean. Like, how do I do that, right? So number one, you want to figure out and pinpoint who you help. Number two, what that problem you help them with is, right? What's the problem you solve? And what's the transformation that they get? It's that simple. It's that simple. Instead of saying something like, I help fitness, I help people with fitness, just say, I help busy entrepreneurs or busy CEOs or busy executives gain X% of muscle in 90 days, right? Or I help busy executives or busy entrepreneurs, world traveling entrepreneurs, right? Jet setting entrepreneurs, right? Wanderlusts, traveling, right? Travelers lose 10 pounds in 60 days, even if they're not home at the gym. Just pinpoint it in some way. And then just say, here's what you get when you give me your credit card, right? In my book, I talk a lot about which one of my friends you want me to introduce you to and what do you want me to pay you for. It's that simple. So if you can reverse engineer that in your mind right now, that means that you have some clarity around this. And clarity breeds confidence when you're trying to pitch. Clarity breeds confidence when you're trying to sell. You want to make sure that you can tell them very, very clearly, this is what I do. Now, I do a lot of different things. I have mastermind groups that I run for a small select group of entrepreneurs. I have You Are the Brand Academy, which is for solopreneurs that are looking to scale and grow their business. That's what I'm talking about on this topic today. But I also have a boutique marketing agency, and we do a lot of different things in our agency because I've touched a lot of different areas in marketing, and it still never fails that when people see me speak, they walk up to me and say, "Okay, I know you mentioned you have clients. What do you do with them?" And so even with me, right, and I'm not saying this in an arrogant way. I'm just saying for me, I've been in my industry for over 10 years. I have a little bit of clout. I have some positioning. I have some recognition in my industry. Good people have vouched for me. They are still asking me, what is it that your agency does? They don't just say, "Oh, you're Mike Kim. You wrote this book. Here's my money. Take it." They don't do that. They still want to know if I can solve that specific problem. So what you want to do is marry your signature offer with a specific problem. Okay. I'll say that again. You want to marry your signature offer with a specific problem. If you have that kind of clarity, you're going to get way ahead of everybody else. You're going to get out of your own way. You're going to really be able to make progress. All right. The third mistake I see people make is not growing an engaged email list from the beginning. Now, this is especially true for people who are doing the first two things I mentioned really well. You might be charging good money, you might have a high ticket offer, you might have a signature offer for a specific problem, but you're under leveraging the other secondary, tertiary side opportunities that can come with serving or delivering those services to the audiences that you're in front of. For example, you get paid really well to go to a speaking engagement, but you collect zero email addresses. You've had 500 people in the room. You do a bang up job. People are looking you up on social media. You're getting follows on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and you still don't have a pathway for them to get them on your email list. You're missing out, right? Even if you're getting well compensated for those opportunities, you have to make sure that you're squeezing all the juice out of the lemon, right? You're squeezing all the juice out of that orange. You want to leverage as many of these opportunities for people to stay in touch with you. And the best way still is email because you're not dealing with these algorithms on social media. You're not dealing with the fickleness and all the other noise that's on social media. You want the ability to go straight into someone's phone, into their main email address account, right? I mean, think about how powerful that is. You can bypass all that other stuff. So for me, when I started out, I was taught well by my mentors. I was taught well from the very beginning to really emphasize growing an email list. And it took time to grow a large list. But I'll tell you what, I will never forget the first time I did a webinar. I did this webinar to a list of 22 people, and I had like 6 people sign up for my coaching program. I did not charge too much for it at the time because it was multiple people. I was charging a lot for my hourly rate, but I had 6 people join this coaching program. I remember I made something like $1,500 or $2,000. This is like 10 years ago, and I could not believe that I made that money. And at the time, that was enough money to cover my rent. And I was like, I can't believe this. It was like a money shift. And it's all because I grew an email list. Had I not done that, right? Had I not done that and instead just kept on focusing on writing things for other clients, I was a copywriter, I was in marketing, like I would never have been able to really scale up my business. All of this happened because I had an email list. If you really look at the life of a freelancer, I'm going to just share from my own experience. If somebody hired me to write a sales page or a bunch of emails, let's say for $2,000, chances are I was spending 10 to 20 hours on that project. We don't have AI. We didn't have AI like we do now, right? I had to go do a lot of research. I had to like study swipe files. I had to study the psychology. I had to study the client. Meanwhile, over here, just by writing a couple of emails, doing a webinar, and then coaching these folks, I was making the same amount of money with way less mental bandwidth being used up. And the cool thing is, I could just redo that again with more people. I could teach the same content or refine it and teach it again, get better at presenting webinars. And I could do this over and over and over again. It's a flywheel, right? So I see people all the time. They're great speakers, they're great coaches, they're heads down one on one. And I look at their email list and there's nothing there. There's almost nothing there. And I'm like, oh gosh, you're just still trading time for money. You're making more money, you're making a lot of money, but you're never going to be able to escape. So no matter where you are, you need to grow an email list. And again, you don't need a huge list in order to make a lot of money. What I've seen the people do that have made this transition really well, and I experienced the same thing, is they'll charge a lot for services, and this will go up and up and up and up, and they'll make more money. And some point, they're growing their email list and they're acquiring those skills and they're acquiring that following. And at some point, if they stick with it, one overtakes the other. I make a lot more from my email list and coaching people who are on my email list and inviting them to presentations and inviting them to programs. And yes, I still put work in because I love doing it, but I make more money doing this and it's way more profitable and way less bandwidth than me going to write a book for a client as a ghostwriter. And I still do that once in a while. Once in a blue moon, I'll do that. Right. But I have this community of people who follow me. It's not huge by internet marketing standards. I mean, people in my world think it's a large list, but I just know the numbers of some of these other folks that are out there. What counts is that they're engaged. What counts is that they look forward to what I'm writing. What counts is that they have some sort of level of trust and relationship with me. So you've got to do that from the beginning. Don't just go and speak somewhere. Speak and bring people into your world and make sure that you get them on an email list. Okay. Okay. The fourth mistake I see people make is that they under document their business and their life. They think that all of their social media has to look like all these other professionals, quote unquote, out there. You don't need to do that. If you look at my Instagram account, it's like a glorious mess. I've never been quote unquote great at social media, the craft of social media. But what I have been great at over all these 10 plus years is just sharing my life, sharing my business, sharing my experiences. Because for me, social media is just a way to be social with people I can't meet in real life. That is the mindset that I take towards social media. Yes, I will occasionally run ads to cold audiences. Yes, I will occasionally spend way too much time crafting the perfect post. But what social media should do for people like us that don't necessarily want to be the next Oprah or the next Diary of a CEO or next Alex Hormozy, just document and share the everyday things that are going on in your life. Let people realize that you're human. Let people connect with these different aspects of your life and still deliver great content. Now, a caveat to all this is that I can do that with social media because I'm growing an email list. On my email list and a podcast, I'm sharing my knowledge, I'm sharing my expertise, and I've done that from year one, which is why I can get away with not over teaching on social media. Social to me, and the way I use it in my business, feels like it's just a way to get to know me in a different way compared to what I send out on my email list, in my what I've written in my book, what I share on my podcast or YouTube channel, what people have seen me present on, what I do on webinars. Yes, that's my expertise. And social media for me is just life. It's just other aspects of my personality. That's been my strategy all these years. Okay. So I've never really had a social media manager. I've rarely hired people to help me with my social. I did it when my book came out and I was getting ready for book promotions because there were just going to be a lot on my plate, but that's the only time I've actually ever hired a social media manager. And what's interesting is that the people who come to me, who join me in my programs or in my mastermind groups, they're very much like me. They're like, Mike, I resonate with this approach. I don't want to really overkill it on social media, overdo it there. I want to retain my sanity. I want to make good money. I want to serve great clients. I want to do projects that I really care about. And I want social media just to sort of be there when I want it to be there. That's fine, right? Um, there are others who make their entire living on social media. They'll sell on TikTok Shop. They are influencers on Instagram or on YouTube. And I totally understand that. I have no problem with what they're doing. But for me, and on this topic, right, how to monetize without a big audience, I'm sharing how I use social media to just put some things in perspective. Now, at some point, do I think I'll invest in social? Yeah, maybe. But from what I've seen in my business all these 10 plus years, I haven't had to do it that much. And I think the work that I'd have to put in, the dial that I'd have to turn that thing up, the amount of money that I'd have to put in would not commensurately grow my business. Does that make sense? Like it would not, I'm just going deeper on the channels I've already built. I'm going deeper on the relationships that I've already built with my audience. I want them to see how I'm growing and evolving. Those who have been with me for years and the people who are finding me new for the first time. I have systems set up. I have pathways. Part of it's the book. The book still sells all these years later. I think it'll continue to sell because this solopreneur space is just growing and growing and growing. Okay. But I've done those. I've said it. I forget it. My expertise is out there. I'll continue to share it. And social media is just something that I just kind of do whenever I feel like it. Okay. So you don't need a huge following. But what I'm saying is that if someone follows me on multiple channels, they get a pretty decent idea of what my life looks like. Yeah, they get a pretty decent idea of that. And that's important to the way that I teach and the way that I run my business. All right. Mistake number 5 is hiding behind a screen. One of the biggest differentiators for me to accelerate my business and grow it was to meet people face to face. I invested time and money in going to events, in joining mastermind groups where they would have events just for that group. in going to private masterminds, 2 or 3 day masterminds. I just came back from one in Boston with Ryan Levesque. It was amazing. I met great people there that I know I'm going to do some projects with down the road. It was over a weekend. It was not super convenient to work on a weekend, but I was like, nope, this is going to be a game changer. It's going to level me up. I just know I'm just going to meet more great people that I haven't met before. And every time I've invested in one of these high end masterminds, it has absolutely exponentially come back in a greater return for me. There is this feeling that like all you have to do to make it online is to grow a massive following. There are so many case studies. I'm not going to throw any people in the bus where there are people who have millions of followers on TikTok and they would say, "Hey, I'm going to be at this conference. Meet me at this booth," and nobody would show up. See, those are numbers. It's not an engaged audience. It's not engaged people. And what I have found is that when you make friends with other people who have good relationships with their own audience, that's when things multiply and engage. So I want to encourage you. I know it's a pain. I know you're busy. I know you've got other things going on in your life. Before the end of the year, invest in going to at least one event in your industry. Make content, share it on social, right? Just what we talked about. Share your thoughts. Um, Make sure you have an idea of what your offer is, your signature offer. Make sure that you do that ahead of time and then go to an event and connect with people there. And you will see how much faster that relationship will grow, how it will accelerate so much faster if people can check you out online either before or after that event. I will never forget my first business event I ever went to in this new industry was November 2013, Dallas, Texas. Shout out to the OG, Michael Hyatt. This is the guy I first learned from. I have no idea how I found him. I think he just had really good SEO at the time, and I was blogging earlier that year in 2013, and I wanted to really learn how to do it. And I wasn't getting any traction. No one was reading my stuff. So I Googled how to blog. And this guy came up, Michael Hyatt. I was like, I don't know who this guy is. I've never heard of him. And at that point in his career, Michael had just left his position as the CEO of Thomas Nelson Publishers. So he was actually fairly new to the game too. And he was sharing what he learned and he had amassed a really big following because he's really good content. And he was my first ever mentor online in this new industry that I was in. And I joined his program. Back then it was called Platform University. It was like $37 a month. And man, I treated that thing like I was investing 37,000 a month in it. I mean, I showed up to the calls, I watched all the videos, I did all the work. I was hungry. I executed, and he started to tweet about my stuff because I was actually a student who did what he was taught. You know, that's very rare, by the way. Side note, how to get ahead real quick with influential people, like do what they say and become a great case study for them. So when Michael announced that he was doing a platform conference event in Dallas later that year, I was like, sign me up. I'm going to sign up for the VIP. I'm going to spend this money to go there. I'm going to invest in myself and go. And I could not believe when I walked in there, people were like, "Hey, are you Mike Kim? You're Mike Kim, right?" Michael Hyatt recognized me at the event mixer. And I was like, "Oh, this is the merit of creating content online, being super consistent and sharing my ideas." Back then, I was blogging consistently at the time. I had not even had a podcast yet, but I was blogging. You know, I was sharing some of these things, these blog posts on Twitter. You know, back then, we had Twitter. It was before it was X, right? And I didn't do much on Instagram, but Facebook and Twitter were the two networks for me that I was posting on. And other people came in, "Hey, Mike, you're Mike, aren't you? I've read some of your stuff. It's good stuff." Oh my gosh, that made the networking and the connections so much easier. And just a few months after that event, the team from one of the other speakers at the event reached out and hired me to write copy for their launch. I mean, I got a client out of going to this event that I was investing in just for me. And I realized, man, there's some sort of magic here. There's some sort of magic when you combine, it's like alchemy. When you combine the content that you're creating online that people can consume passively, you pour your effort into getting better at sharing those ideas. You have a signature offer. For me, that at that time it was freelancing, and you go out and meet people face to face. You feel them out, you feel their energy, they feel yours, and everything just kind of comes together. There's magic in that, right? So I want to encourage you, don't just go fish for clients. Go out there, learn, get around people in your industry. If you offer a service that's valuable to that industry, create content for those people, solve their problems as best as you can by educating them online, and go and meet them. People do business with people, not with content, not with not with stuff that happens behind a screen. So I really, really want to encourage you to be proactive in creating and cultivating connections. For me, I've never wanted to join a community where there are thousands of people. I just didn't. I've never understood that. Okay, I've always invested a little bit more money and more time into smaller containers, just increasingly smaller. The smaller, the better, because I can go deeper with those few people. That's just how it's been for me. And you can, again, pick up on this whole theme, how to do all this without having a huge audience. Well, then don't invest in places that have huge audiences. Invest in places and people that have smaller but more engaged audiences, more engaged followings, more engaged and smaller containers so that you can stand out in an easier way. All right. So I hope you found this helpful. These are just mistakes I've seen people make over the years. You do not need a huge following to make huge amounts of money. I'm case in point, and over the years, my audience has grown, but very organically. It's just compounded. I've never had this like huge spike where like I got on some podcast that blew up my exposure. This never happened to me. I've never gone viral. 10 plus years. Sometimes how come it just never happens for me, right? I've just never gone viral. So I am at least a model maybe for you that you can do really, really well in your business without going viral. I never had a blue check mark on any of my social media accounts until Instagram came out and started selling them. And then I turned it off and now I can't buy it again. So I don't even have a blue check mark. Okay. All I've got is my reputation with an engaged group of readers and listeners. And maybe that includes you. And some of these folks have stayed with me for years. And my mindset is to go deeper with the people who I already have. I'm not worried about who's not at the party. I'm more concerned about being present with the people who are. Okay. And the better you get at what you do and the more consistent you get at what you do, and you do some of these things, you clarify your offer, you put your time at a premium, you have that signature offer that creates a solution for a specific problem, right? And you just share a little bit of yourself on social media and you go out and invest in opportunities and meeting people face to face and getting around their energy and soaking that up and seeing that people think about these same problems that you're probably facing in very different ways. You will have progress. You will the path will unfold for you, and make the investment in that. Invest in yourself. Bet on yourself, right? Because then you dictate the returns. I've always had that mindset. I invest in myself because I can control how much I study, how much I read, how much I execute on these ideas. That is completely within my control. The results, I've got no idea what's going to happen, but I can control the energy and the effort that I put in when I bet on myself. So bet on yourself. I hope you found this helpful. If you're watching on YouTube, would so appreciate it if you'd like subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on the podcast, hit me up, DM me, let me know that you listened to it. And if you've got any questions on this, please share them. Reach out to me, share it. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment, DM me on Instagram at Mike Kim. No blue check mark right now. Okay. Hope this was helpful, and I will see you again soon.